The U.S. envoy Tim Lenderking says Houthis pursue military options with Iranian support. World Food Programme reports that 60 million Yemenis are food insecure. The government forces defeat Houthi rebels in different areas of the southern fronts in Ma'rib. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fuad. The U.S. envoy for Yemen, Tim Lenderking, says that Houthis are pursuing military options, armed and supported by the Iranians. Lenderking, in an interview, stressed that the solution is diplomatic, not military, noting that Iran is the main issue as it continues to arm, train, and equip the Houthis. The U.S. envoy said that he is in touch with all the parties and there is no restraints placed on his engagements, stressing that Houthi, despite their claims, are very responsive to U.S. engagement, and they realize that the U.S. has an indispensable role. The United States said that Iran continues to support terrorist operations in the region and provide support to its proxies in Bahrain, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, and that al-Qaeda leaders are still residing on Iranian soil. John Godfrey, the acting coordinator of counterterrorism affairs at the U.S. State Department, said that al-Qaeda's affiliates enhanced its presence abroad, particularly in Yemen, while the latest annual U.S. report on terrorism in the world confirmed that terrorist attacks attributed to al-Qaeda and ISIS decreased in Yemen during the past year, 2020, compared to 2019, but also stressed that Iran has exploited the internal conflict to expand its influence in Yemen and provide advanced weapons and equipment for Houthis, who participated in attacks against regional targets. Iran's foreign ministry said that its envoy to Houthis, Hassan Irlou, has left Yemen and headed back to receive treatment after testing positive for COVID-19. Foreign Ministry spokesman Saeed Khatibzadeh said that Iran had recently contacted some regional countries to help facilitate Irlou's transfer to Iran for treatment, as he has been infected with COVID-19 for a few days, noting that his transfer is currently underway. Relief organizations in Yemen reported that 11.1 million Yemenis people received general food aid during the past month despite Houthi escalation. According to the World Food Programme, Houthi escalation, especially in Ma'rib and the integrated wave of displacement, show the need for an amount of $812.7 million to cover the needs from December to May 2022. According to the latest World Food Programme's update, the national average rate of insufficient food consumption in Yemen is 43%, above the extremely high 40% threshold. Key international aid organizations in Yemen have warned that the country is stricken by famine and that the level of hunger is unprecedented. The rate of child malnutrition is on the highest in the world, and the nutrition situation continues to deteriorate. A recent survey showed that almost one-third of families have gaps in their diets. More details about this in the following report.
Malnutrition in Yemen is a health issue that predates the beginning of the current conflict, but the nearly 7-year-long war has aggravated it. The causes of malnutrition in children go beyond a simple lack of food. Malnutrition in Yemen has been at times attributed to famine, which gives the impression that the country does not have enough food for its people. However, the issue of malnutrition here is more complex than a simple scarcity of food. People are unable to afford to buy food that otherwise exists. Many Yemenis are either unpaid for their work or have lost their livelihoods due to the conflict. On top of this, the Yemeni currency coupled with high prices of food, fuel, and other necessities. Poor health and breastfeeding practices further aggravate the situation. An almost non-existent general healthcare system has made access to healthcare very difficult, if not impossible, for many pregnant women, mothers, and newborn children. And an undernourished mother is more likely to give birth to an underweight child. A child suffering from malnutrition remains untreated for too long and can end up with a more severe condition requiring hospitalization. While the health system needs attention, responding to all basic needs is the only way forward to address the issue of malnutrition. Most importantly, the warring parties must ensure that the cost of conflict does not fall on those least able to bear it. Malnutrition cases among children under 5 are likely to continue rising both in number and severity.
The Yemeni government warned from death among the displaced people in Ma'rib due to low temperatures and lack of tens of thousands of shelter and food. The Executive Unit for the Management of IDPs camps stated that death in the camps among displaced has become a tragic reality, especially with health escalation amid winter and crumbling living conditions. This came after the death of 3 children due to cold weather. With the winter months setting in, many displaced people in Ma'rib do not have the clothing, blankets, and other basic items. They need to stay safe and warm, especially those living in makeshift shelters that are not equipped enough to protect them from the hard weather. The following report has more details on this.
With the winter month approaching, the suffering of displaced people in Yemen due to the war continues to worsen. Many people do not have the clothing, blankets, and other basic items they will need to stay safe and warm, especially those living in shelters that are not equipped to protect them from Houthi artillery shelling. More than 45,000 people have been displaced by the fierce fighting in Ma'rib as cold weather sets in. Families are displaced for the second time in the 7-year civil war and have nothing but very few blankets to keep them warm during the cold nights. Since the beginning of 2021, the Houthi militia has launched a wave of attacks. The most violent have been in Ma'rib Governorate, using various internationally prohibited methods of warfare, including bombing, forced displacement, and abuse. Those violations have taken the heaviest toll on displaced persons, killing dozens of displaced people and forcing thousands of families that were already displaced to flee again. Most of the displacement camps have no humanitarian services, no schools, no hospitals, or any other services. IDPs, meanwhile, face high levels of food insecurity and few services and livelihood opportunities. Camps have been subjected to artillery shelling of various kinds, with women and children accounting for most of the casualties. Those violations have resulted in an unspeakable humanitarian disaster. Hundreds of families have lost their shelters as dozens of dwellings and tents have been burned down. Various kinds of physical and psychological harm have been inflicted upon hundreds of displaced persons who have endured days and nights of siege by the Houthi militia and ended up without a roof over their heads after fleeing the repeated bombardment. Entire families flee and return with the ebb and flow of violence. Returning may mean going back to a damaged or destroyed house. Some people have even returned to home areas near the front lines because of the high costs associated with their displacement. Still, there is no proper shelter, no place to sleep, not enough blankets. These people have nothing. A lasting peace might enable people to return to a normal life and allow IDPs, who in some cases have been displaced for years, to achieve sustainable solutions.
Oxfam International said that raging battles forced more than 100,000 people to flee their homes in the past 3 months. Paolo Pezzati, the political advisor for Oxfam, said that more than 120 civilians were killed in the past 2 months, and many families continue to risk their lives with fighting close to them. For its part, the United Nations Migration Agency said that more than 2,000 African migrants were evacuated since the beginning of 2021. The organization said that 2,028 African migrants were evacuated from Yemen, starting in January to mid-December, including 1,622 men, 130 women, 248 children, and 28 girls. The organization added that Yemen is not the final destination intended for the majority of migrants, yet thousands of them are stranded in miserable conditions. In Ma'rib, artillery of the government forces targeted gatherings and reinforcements of Houthi militia in the southern fronts. According to sources, the targeting resulted in destroying 5 military vehicles and killing those on board. The official spokesman for the armed forces, Brigadier General Abdul Majalli, said the forces advanced on the ground in several areas including Dhanna, El Amoud, El Airaf, El Faliha, El Juba, Umrish, Malaa, and Harid districts. He added that battles in the outskirts of the eastern Balak mountains ended with the death of all infiltrating militants. Brigadier Majalli said that the militia's losses are estimated at 13 vehicles, noting that coalition air raids destroyed 52 tanks, 8 armored vehicles. Turning to the west coast, the Giants Brigades denied rumors concerning withdrawal from frontiers. Commander of the Giants Brigades, General Abdou Zari', confirmed that the Giant forces are stationed at the west coast front among other joint forces members. He said that news promoted on social media about the withdrawal of his forces from the fighting fronts of the western coast are false. To that end, in Haid, the joint forces destroyed Houthi Operations Center and barracks, causing heavy losses among the rebels. According to military sources, the operations center among 3 barracks in the vicinity of Hais were all successfully destroyed, and rebels were inflicted with heavy losses in lives and equipment. Still in the west coast, Masan project destroyed 2,183 Houthi mines and explosive devices in Bab el-Mandab. Masam's media office said that these mines and explosive devices were removed by the project's teams in El Khoukha and Hais. It indicated that all mines were planted in residential and agricultural areas, schools, health centers, and public roads, which pose a threat on the lives of civilians. Coming next. In a new Houthi aggression against the country's cultural heritage, rebel Houthi turned the House of Culture in Sana'a into a clothing store.
اضطرينا نحن نغادر من ذي وزحنا.
الله يستبدلكم يا محولين تبيله الله يستبدل.
Welcome back. In Ib, Houthi militia with the participation of the so-called Zainabiyad broke into the Minister of Communication and Information Technology father's house, Najib El-Auj. Media and local sources reported Houthi militia men led by El-Zainabiyad expelled women and children from the house. Houthi militia has proved racist and sectarian. They have been working on distorting Yemeni cultural heritage and eliminating its diversity. In a new assault against such a rich heritage, the militia has turned the House of Culture in Sana'a into a clothing store. This house has hosted key local and Arab poets and artists and enriched the cultural scene in the country. More details about this in the following report.
In a new assault for culture, Houthi militia turned the House of Culture in Sana'a into a clothing store. The House of Culture is one of the most important cultural sites in Yemen. Since its opening in 2000, it has become a civilizational example as it contributed to the Yemeni culture by being a destination for cultural and artistic events. This site was visited by Gunta, Grass, Muhammad Darwish, Adonis, Adil Imam, Nur al-Sharif and other cultural figures, and is now a place for selling clothes. Houthis cleared out the building halls from its contents and filled it with clothes, cosmetics and shoes for selling. Ministry of Culture and Tourism and General Book Authority condemned this blatant violations committed by the rebels in Sana'a. They said that this is a deliberate insult to culture and incitement by the militia to prove that they are committed to destroy everything related to knowledge, culture awareness, freedom, art and life. Instead, they want to raise the voice of death, destruction, racism, and their terrorist acts. The statement added, the act of turning the House of Culture into a clothing store sparked a widespread discontent among Yemeni intellectuals and activists. They said that stripping of the symbol of the culture house concludes the dark reality that Yemen lives and introduces another year of darkness in the history of the country. Yemenis considered this act an expression of the Houthis' historical hatred with science and culture. This crime is not the first in assaulting cultural institutions for what they were established. Houthi militia continue to assault everything related to Yemen's cultural heritage.
The Arab world celebrates the International Day of the Arabic Language this year, under the title The Arabic Language and Cultural Communication. Arabic language is one of the most widely used languages in the world, spoken daily by more than 400 million around the globe. It is considered a sacred language as it's the language of the Holy Quran plus major ritual language for a number of Arab Christians and Jews since Middle Ages. Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at the University of Aden opened the first book fair in cooperation and coordination with the Arab Foundation for Science and Culture in Egypt on the occasion of the International Day of the Arabic Language. Minister of Higher Education, Governor of Aden, and University President attended the event. The book fair includes a collection of valuable and diverse books with more than 500 titles, as a real breakthrough towards providing the opportunity for students and researchers to access the acquired books and scientific references to meet their desires and achieve their knowledge goals. The Iranian-backed militia, since seized power in 2014, has been abusing the educational system in the country. They have injected the curriculum with racist and sectarian ideology which helped their political agenda. The following report has more details on this.
Schools and universities in Yemen have been the target of attacks, shelling, airstrikes, and occupation by the various fractions in Yemen's conflict. The country's education system has been devastated and hundreds of schools and institutions have been completely destroyed, and many fell under the control of the Iran-backed Houthi militia. Houthis hijacking the education sector is part of their takeover of Yemen. The Houthi attacks on schools and universities have not been limited to bullets and bombs. They seek control over these institutions. Houthis are also implementing the new curriculum, which poses a serious threat to Yemeni society and the generations that will be forced to receive targeted knowledge and concepts that were previously associated with sectarian ideology outside the education system. According to a recent UNICEF report, over 2 million school children in Yemen are now out of school, as poverty, conflict, and lack of opportunities disrupt their education. UNICEF called to stop attacks on schools, as 231 schools have been targeted since 2015. It also called on international donors to support education programs with long-term funding and to ensure teachers receive regular income so that the children can continue to learn and grow.
Amid warnings from the outbreak of the fourth wave of COVID-19, the National Committee Against Coronavirus recorded 5 new cases of the pandemic. Committee officials said on Twitter that 3 cases were recorded in Aden and 2 in Al Bayda. Also 5 recovered cases were recorded and 2 deaths. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 10,097, including 1,976 deaths and 6,965 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The U.S. envoy Tim Lander King says Houthis pursue military options with Iranian support. World Food Programme reports that 16 million Yemenis are food insecure. The government forces defeat Houthi rebels in different areas of the southern fronts in Ma'rib. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.